Chapter 1. The letter from the bank arrived on a Tuesday, which was fitting, because the last time Catherine Elliott's life had rearranged itself without her permission, that had been a Tuesday as well. She was beginning to develop opinions about Tuesdays. She was sitting across from her father at breakfast, buttering toast with the careful economy of a woman who knew precisely how much butter remained in the larder and how many mornings it needed to last. Sir Andrew Elliot was reading his correspondence with the unhurried dignity of a man who had once owned 3 estates and now owned 1, and that one mortgaged, and the mortgage a subject no one mentioned at breakfast, because breakfast was the one meal where the Elliots still pretended they were fine. They were not fine. They had not been fine for some years. But the toast was adequate and the tea was hot, and Catherine had become, over 23 years of practice, genuinely excellent at appearing fine, which is not the same thing as being fine, but which requires considerably more skill. Her father had written to the bank 3 days ago about renegotiating the mortgage terms. The quarterly payments were straining them. He had drafted the letter himself, in his careful hand, and the reply had come back with the morning post, and it was not the reply he expected, because the bank informed him that there were no terms to renegotiate. The mortgage had been paid in full, 13 months ago, by the Duke of Harlow. Sir Andrew put down his coffee. His face did something she had not seen it do in a long time. It went still. Not angry still. Not grief still. The specific expression of a proud man encountering information he cannot immediately classify as either a kindness or an insult, and so his face simply stops while his mind catches up. Catherine, were you aware that your mortgage was settled by the Duke of Harlow? Catherine's teacup stopped halfway to her mouth. She set it down. No. And here it is necessary to explain what the Duke of Harlow was to Catherine Elliott, and what he was not, and why the distance between those two things had occupied every waking hour of the previous 12 months. 1 year ago, Lord Edmund Ashford, now the Duke of Harlow, had ended his engagement to Catherine. He had not explained why. He had written a letter, 4 sentences. Miss Elliott, I regret that I must withdraw my offer of marriage. The decision is final. I wish you well. Ashford. Catherine had been engaged to him for 3 months, in love with him for 7. She read the letter twice. She folded it. She finished her tea because the tea was paid for, and she was not the sort of woman who wasted things, even on the morning her life ended. She wrote back 2 sentences. Your Grace, I return your ring enclosed. C.E. She placed the sapphire, his grandmother's, the most beautiful thing she had ever been given, in its box, wrapped it in cloth, and tucked beneath the ring a note she had written, in 8 words and 3 seconds of pure recklessness. I would have married you for nothing. C. She sent the box by the afternoon post. She did not ask why. She composed the question 40 times in her head and never sent it, because her father had raised her to believe that dignity was the only currency a woman without fortune could spend, and Catherine Elliott, who could not afford new gloves, could always afford dignity. It was the one luxury that cost nothing, and was therefore the only one left. Edmund received the box. He did not open it. He locked it in the top drawer of his desk. He carried the key on a chain inside his waistcoat, against his chest. He carried it for 1 year. The note she left under the ring, 8 words that would have changed everything, sat in the dark for 12 months, unread, 3 inches from a forgery, separated by a sapphire and a man who could not face either. But Catherine did not know about the forgery. She did not know about the note still sealed in its box. She knew only that the Duke of Harlow had ended their engagement without a word of explanation, and that a year later, while she was buttering toast with strict attention to the butter-to-days ratio, her father had just informed her that the same Duke had secretly paid their mortgage 13 months ago, and apparently forgotten to mention it. Her father slid the letter across the table. She read it twice, because Catherine Elliott did everything important twice. The first time for comprehension, and the second for ammunition. The dates were clear: paid in February, 2 weeks before the engagement ended. An early wedding gift, a kindness performed in silence, never mentioned, never revoked, because the Duke, having ended the engagement, had apparently never asked for the money back. There is a kind of cruelty in an unkind man, and it is easily survived because it is expected. There is another kind of cruelty in a kind man, and it is not survived at all, because it arrives looking like something else. Her brother Henry, who was 20 and whose temperament had not improved with age, stood up from the table. His chair scraped against the stone floor with the particular violence of a young man who had not yet learned that furniture is not a participant in family disputes. He would ride to Harlow Park that morning and return the money. Catherine set her knife down. "Henry, sit down." The Duke had paid for their house and broken his sister's heart, and they were living in his charity, and he absolutely would not stand for it. "Henry, sit down." Henry sat down. He sat down because Catherine had used the voice, the specific, level, do not test me voice, that she had deployed approximately 4 times in her life, each time in a crisis, each time successfully. Henry had heard it twice. He did not wish to hear it a third time, because the third time was historically when things got thrown. Sir Andrew said the money must be returned or the terms renegotiated. They could not live in a house paid for by a man who... He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. "Father, you cannot repay it. Henry cannot go. He will start a fight. I will go. I am the only Elliot who can sit across from the Duke of Harlow without the meeting ending in blood or a collapse. I will negotiate the terms of repayment. I will be civil. I will return by Tuesday." She rose from the table. She went upstairs. She sat on her bed the way she had sat on it a year ago, holding a folded letter, except that this time the letter was from a bank. And the news was not that he was leaving, but that he had been kind. That he had been kind 13 months ago, before the 4 sentences, before the end. And this kindness, arriving 12 months late, was worse than the leaving, because the leaving she had learned to carry, and the kindness she had not. She packed a small trunk. She hired a chaise, which cost 4 shillings, she would notice for the rest of the month. She rode to Harlow Park. She was admitted. The housekeeper, Mrs. Albright, who remembered her, who curtsied with the careful warmth of a woman who had liked the girl, and who had opinions about what had happened, showed her to the study. Mrs. Albright's opinions were contained entirely in the tea she produced unbidden, which was of a quality the household reserved exclusively for guests Mrs. Albright approved of. The Duke got adequate tea. Miss Elliott got the reserve. Edmund was at his desk. He stood when she entered. He had not seen her in 12 months. She was the same. The gray traveling dress, the straight spine, the face of a woman who had been carrying something heavy for a long time, and had not put it down, and had not asked anyone to help her hold it. "Your Grace, I am here about the mortgage." The mortgage. He said this the way he said most things, which was with total composure and an internal landscape that was on fire. He had forgotten the mortgage. He had genuinely, completely forgotten it. He had paid it in February, during the engagement, because it was the right thing to do for the family he was about to join. And then the engagement had ended, and he had not thought about the mortgage again, because the mortgage was a line item in an estate that contained, in its most important drawer, a ring and a lie and a key. And the mortgage was nothing beside those. Catherine explained. The bank had written in reply to her father's enquiry about terms. Her family could not accept the debt. She was here to negotiate terms of repayment. She would prefer to arrange them quickly. She would prefer not to be in this room longer than necessary. They negotiated. It took 40 minutes. She was precise. She had prepared a repayment schedule, small amounts, quarterly, over 8 years, at no interest. She had done the mathematics herself. She presented them on a single sheet of paper in her own handwriting. Edmund looked at the handwriting. During the engagement, he had received letters from Catherine. After the engagement, he had burned them. All of them. On a Tuesday in May, in the study fireplace, because keeping them was a form of hope, and hope was a luxury he had cut from the accounts. He had not held her handwriting in a year. The repayment schedule was the first new sample, and something about it was different from the letter in the locked drawer, and the difference was small and precise, and he could not name it, but it sat at the edge of his attention, like a sound heard from a distance that could not yet be identified. He agreed to the terms. She nodded. She folded the paper. She put it in her pocket. "Thank you, Your Grace. I will not trouble you further." She turned to leave. She reached the door. She stopped. She did not turn around. "The mortgage? You paid it 2 weeks before you ended the engagement. You settled my father's worst debt as a gift to the family you were about to join. And then you left." He said nothing. "I have spent 12 months believing you simply changed your mind. The mortgage makes that harder to believe. Men who change their minds do not settle debts first." She opened the door. She walked through it. She did not cry on the journey home. She cried that night, in bed, into a pillow, the way she had cried for 12 months, silently, privately, into fabric she would eventually have to replace. Edmund sat in his study for 3 hours after she left. He opened the locked drawer. He placed the repayment schedule beside the forged letter. 2 pieces of handwriting, side by side. The same hand. Nearly the same. But the T's on the repayment schedule crossed lower. The slant tilted a degree further left. Tiny differences. The kind a forger would practice away, but that surface fresh. In a hand writing under its own pressure, not performing someone else's. He did not yet understand what he was seeing. He put the repayment schedule in a different drawer, an open one. 2 drawers, one locked, one open. The question had begun to form in the back of his mind, like weather building on the horizon, and he did not have the sense to come inside. Chapter 2. 6 weeks later, Arabella Kerr married Lieutenant Thomas Whitfield at the Kerr family's estate in Hampshire, in a private ceremony in the long drawing room, with 30 guests and wildflowers on every surface. Arabella was Catherine's closest friend, the woman the real letter had been written to, the woman the forged letter had been addressed to. She did not know about the forgery. She did not know why the engagement had ended. She knew only that her 2 friends had been engaged and then were not, and she had maintained separate friendships with both, because she was loyal and because she was not stupid. And she had spent 12 months watching 2 people she loved be miserable separately, and she had decided she had had enough. She invited them both. She seated them at the same table, 4 seats apart, with enough guests between them to serve as a buffer. She had calibrated this with the precision of a woman who had once seated the Graysons next to the Warings after the sheep dispute, and had emerged with both families speaking, which was regarded in Hampshire as a diplomatic achievement of the first order. Catherine considered declining for approximately 4 seconds. Arabella had been her closest confidant through the worst year of her life. Declining Arabella's day because a man she used to love would be present was, in Catherine's private taxonomy of dignity, an expenditure she refused to make. She would attend, she would be civil, she would leave before the dancing. Edmund considered declining for approximately 6 seconds, 2 more than Catherine, because he had the additional burden of knowing why he had ended it, and therefore the additional calculation of what it would cost him to sit across from the woman he had left, based on evidence he found in a book. They attended. They did not speak. They did not look at each other. The dinner lasted 2 hours, and was the longest dinner either of them had ever endured. And Edmund had once attended a state banquet that lasted until midnight and involved 7 courses and a speech about canals. Then Lieutenant Whitfield stood to give his toast. He was a man unused to public speaking. His hands were shaking. He held his glass and looked at Arabella and said, without notes, without preparation, that he did not have fine words. He was a sailor. He knew wind and water and the distance between places. He knew that the distance between the man he was before he met her and the man he was now was the longest journey he had ever taken, and the only one he never wanted to make again. She was his harbor. He did not know what he was to her. He had been afraid to ask. He was asking now, in front of everyone, because he had learned that the questions you are afraid to ask are the ones you must ask loudest. He turned to Arabella. "What am I to you?" Arabella, crying, laughing, holding a napkin to her face. "You are the idiot I love. Sit down. You are making me blotchy." The room laughed. The room cried. Catherine looked across the table. She did not mean to. The words, "the questions you are afraid to ask," arrived in her chest, and her eyes moved before her discipline could stop them. And she looked across the table, and Edmund was looking at her. 4 seats apart, across champagne glasses and wedding flowers, he was looking at her the way he had looked at her in a garden on a Sunday a year ago. Openly, without defense, his face unguarded for exactly 3 seconds before his composure caught up and closed over it like water closing over a stone. 3 seconds. She saw it. He saw her see it. They both looked away. The toast ended, but the moment lodged. Catherine's hand, beneath the table, closed into a fist she did not make consciously, her fingernails pressing into her palm, the small pain a replacement for the larger one, and she held it there until the impression of her own nails was a row of half-moons in the skin, and the room had moved on, and she had not. At 10 o'clock, she put on her cloak. The path to the door required her to pass Edmund's window. The room was crowded. The corridor between the dancers was narrow. She passed him, close enough that the warmth coming off him reached her before she reached him, the specific heat of a living body in a warm room, and the smell, his soap, which was the same soap, the smell she remembered from the garden, from the engagement, from the 7 months, and her step faltered. A quarter step, a fraction of a stride, so brief that no one in the room saw it except the man she was passing, who registered a quarter-step deviation the way a surveyor registers a shift in the ground. She walked on. She left. They did not speak at Arabella's wedding. They did not need to. The 3 seconds and the quarter step had said everything that needed saying, and considerably more than either of them wanted said. We will take a very short break. If you do not want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. Chapter 3. 3 weeks later, Catherine's mother fell ill. Mrs. Elliot had been declining, not from the broken engagement itself, but from the slow, grinding erosion of a woman who had been managing a collapsing household for 20 years and whose body had finally presented the bill. She needed a specialist. The best physician in the region was Dr. Hargreaves, who practiced from a clinic on the Harlow estate, a clinic the Ashford family had funded for 3 generations. He was the only physician within 40 miles who treated conditions of the lungs. He was excellent. He was also, geographically, at the end of a lane that passed directly beneath the windows of the Duke of Harlow's study. Catherine's father refused to go. Henry refused louder and with profanity. Catherine took her mother to the clinic. She installed her at the Village Inn, a small establishment with 4 rooms and a kitchen that served adequate soup, the word adequate here performing a great deal of charitable work. The treatment required 3 weeks of daily attendance. Edmund learned of her presence from his steward, Mr. Thornton, on the 2nd day. Thornton mentioned it at breakfast in the neutral tone of a man delivering a weather report that happened to contain a hurricane. Edmund put down his coffee. "Thank you, Thornton." Thornton waited. Thornton had served the family for 19 years and had developed an instinct for the specific quality of silence that followed information the Duke did not wish to have received. This silence was of the highest quality Thornton had yet encountered. He left. On the 3rd morning, Edmund was riding back from the fields when he saw her on the lane. The gray dress, a small bag under her arm, her mother's medicines. She was walking with the particular stride of a woman who had been walking alone for a year and who had stopped noticing she was alone because the aloneness had become structural. It was not a temporary condition, it was architecture. The lane was 7 feet wide. His horse was 5 feet of it. She was 2 feet of it. The remaining distance was approximately nothing. She heard the horse. She looked up. "Your Grace." "Miss Elliot. I hope Mrs. Elliot is recovering well." "She is. Dr. Hargreaves is excellent." "He is." The conversation was performed with the meticulous courtesy of 2 diplomats negotiating a ceasefire over a disputed border in which both parties had sustained casualties they were not prepared to name. This happened every morning. Neither of them adjusted the timing, because adjusting would be admitting that the other's presence required adjustment, which would be admitting that the other's presence mattered, which was the one thing both of them had spent 12 months refusing to admit. So they met, and they exchanged approximately 12 words and parted. And the lane was 7 feet wide, and the distance between them was narrowing by something other than feet. On the 5th morning, it rained. Catherine was walking without an umbrella. She did not own one. It was not in the budget. She was wet, her gray dress dark with rain, the bag shielded under her arm. She was walking with her head down and her shoulders set against the weather, in the posture of a woman who did not consider rain a crisis, because a crisis was a forged letter or a broken engagement or a mother who could not breathe, and rain was just rain. Edmund, on horseback, in a riding coat that shed water because it cost more than the inn's annual revenue, rode to her. He stopped. He did not say good morning. He removed his coat and held it out. She looked at the coat. She looked at him. He was in his shirt sleeves, in the rain, on a horse. "You will be wet." "I have a house." "You have a quarter mile." She took the coat. She put it on. It was enormous, the shoulders past her elbows, the hem at her knees, and the lining held the warmth of his body, and the warmth reached her skin through the wet cotton of her dress, and she was aware, with the sudden, unwelcome precision of a woman whose body has better memory than her pride, that the coat was warm because he had been wearing it, and the warmth was his warmth, and the warmth was everywhere. "This coat is ridiculous." "It is warm." "It smells of horse." "I have been on a horse." "I can tell." She wrapped the coat around herself. The corner of her mouth moved, just the corner, just a fraction. She walked on. She did not look back. She did not need to. She could feel him watching her the way she could feel the warmth, which was to say, completely, involuntarily, and against her better judgment. She returned the coat the next morning, cleaned, folded, left at the gatehouse with a note. "Your Grace, thank you for the loan. The coat has been laundered. It no longer smells of horse. This is an improvement. C.E." He read the note 3 times. He put it in the open drawer with the repayment schedule. 2 pieces of her handwriting in the open drawer, 1 in the locked drawer. 2 truths and a lie, separated by a lock and a key, and the cowardice of a man who had 40 rooms and could not face 4 square inches of paper. On the 9th morning, Mrs. Elliot was well enough to walk to the clinic herself. Catherine walked somewhere else, past the clinic, past the village, along the river. She crossed a stile at the river bend without thinking, followed the stream through a meadow where the path had gone to seed, pushed through a gate that hung open on a rusted hinge, and found herself in a garden she did not recognize. Overgrown, half wild, roses climbing a crumbling wall, a stone bench facing the water. There was no marker, no sign, nothing that said Harlow. The garden had the look of a place no one had visited in a long time, and Catherine, who had spent a year becoming expert in the appearance of things no one visited, recognized it immediately. She sat on the bench. She did not know that this was the bench where Edmund had proposed, with his grandmother's ring in his pocket, the bench he had not visited in a year because sitting there meant hearing himself say, "I cannot wait for June," and June had never come. She closed her eyes. The muscles in her face that had been holding the expression of a woman who was fine loosened by a fraction, and the fraction was everything, and she did not know anyone was watching. Edmund found her there. He came around the hedge on horseback, and she was on the bench, his bench, with her eyes closed and her face turned up to the morning, and she looked the way she had looked 7 months before the engagement, when she had told him any man who loved a room full of books was a man she could probably tolerate, and the word tolerate had made him laugh, and the laugh had been the beginning of everything. She opened her eyes. "I did not know this was your garden. It was my grandmother's. The roses need tending. I know. I have not come here in a year." She heard the "a year." She knew, with the precision of a woman who had been counting months the way other people count coins, that he had not come here since April. She did not ask why. She had a bench of her own, a corner of her garden in Hampshire where she had sat with him once, and she had not visited it either, because some places hold the shape of the person who was in them, and sitting in the empty shape is worse than not sitting at all. He dismounted. He tied the horse to the bridge. He walked into the garden. He did not sit on the bench. Sitting beside her on this bench was a claim he had not earned and did not deserve. He stood. She sat. The stream ran between the roses. "Edmund." "Not your grace."
She used it the way a person strikes a match, deliberately, with full knowledge that the thing might catch. "I want to ask you something." His hands were at his sides and very still. "At Arabella's wedding, during the toast, you looked at me the way you used to look at me. For 3 seconds. Then you stopped. I have been thinking about those 3 seconds for 3 weeks. I have been thinking about the mortgage for 6 weeks. These two things do not fit together. The leaving does not fit with the looking. Something is wrong with the story I have been telling myself for 12 months, and I am asking you, Edmund, in this garden, on this bench, to tell me what is wrong with it." He sat down, not on the bench, on the ground, in the grass, beside the bench, at her feet. Not gracefully, completely. The composure did not catch up this time. The water did not close over the stone. He sat there and let her see. He told her about a book returned by post and a letter inside it, a letter to Arabella, in her handwriting, on her paper. He recited the forgery from memory. Fond of him, I suppose, in the way one is fond of a well-appointed room. The fortune is the thing. The fortune is the only thing. Catherine's fingers, in her lap, tightened around each other. Her knuckles whitened. The word room landed in her body like a blow, because that was not how she had described him, and the distance between a well-appointed room and the man she had loved was the distance between the truth and the lie. And someone had closed that distance deliberately, and she could feel the closing in her hands. He told her the handwriting was hers. The paper was hers. He told her he had burned her real letters, all of them, every letter she had written during the engagement, destroyed in May, because keeping them was hope, and hope was a luxury he had cut from the accounts. He had no basis for comparison. The forged letter was all he had. Until March, when she put a repayment schedule on his desk in her own hand, and the T's crossed differently, and the slant was wrong. And the difference was so small that a man who had burned the originals would never have caught it if the new sample had not been written under pressure, by a hand that was not trying to be anyone's hand but its own. "I did not write that letter. I know." "How do you know?" "Because you are sitting on this bench asking me what went wrong instead of walking away. And because the T's on your repayment schedule cross lower than the letter in the book. I noticed in March. I have been staring at the difference for 3 months." Her hands released each other. She spread her fingers flat against her knees, pressing down, holding herself to the bench.
Someone forged a letter in my handwriting. Philip. The name landed in the garden the way a stone lands in water. Philip Ashford, 26. Orphaned. Raised alongside Edmund like a brother. Drowning in gambling debts. His survival depended on remaining Edmund's heir. Catherine meant a wife. A wife meant children. Children meant Philip's claim evaporated. He had visited the Elliots in February. He had been left alone in the morning room. He had found Catherine's writing desk. He had found the real letter to Arabella, the one that said, "I would have married him for nothing. It is not the fortune. It has never been the fortune. It is him." And he had rewritten it, word by word, practicing her handwriting for 2 days, turning love into indifference the way a forger turns copper into the appearance of gold. Catherine was quiet for a long time. My real letter said that I would have married you for nothing. Edmund closed his eyes. I put those same words in the ring box, under the ring. 8 words. I thought you would open the box and find it. He opened his eyes. You did not open the box. The truth has been in your desk for 12 months, and you did not read it. She stood up from the bench. Her whole body was shaking, the composure gone, the performance of recovery gone. And what was underneath was not weakness, but fury. A cold fury, a precise fury. The fury of a woman who had carried a wound for a year and had just been told it was unnecessary. Open the box. Tonight. Read the note. And then I do not know, Edmund. I do not know what comes after this. She walked out of the garden. We will take a very short break. If you do not want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. Chapter 4. He rode home. He went to the study. He took the key from the chain. He opened the drawer. He unwrapped the cloth. He opened the box. He lifted the ring. Underneath it, folded small, pressed flat by 12 months of weight, was a piece of paper. 8 words. I would have married you for nothing. C. He sat at his desk with the forged letter and the real note and the ring between them, and he understood that the truth and the lie had been locked in the same drawer for 12 months, 3 inches apart, separated by a sapphire. And he had chosen the lie because the lie was visible and the truth was hidden, and he had not looked. There is a kind of cowardice that looks exactly like certainty, and it is the most expensive kind. He did not sleep. In the morning, he rode to Philip's lodgings. Philip was at breakfast, eggs and toast, and the morning paper folded beside his plate, the small domestic theater of a man performing a life he could not afford. Edmund entered without knocking. He put the forged letter on the table beside Philip's plate. Philip looked at it. His hand, holding a fork, stopped. The fork did not lower. It stayed suspended, an inch above the eggs. And Philip's face did not confess so much as collapse, the way a wall collapses. Not all at once, but in a slow structural failure, the mortar giving way before the stone. He had been waiting 12 months for the floor to give way. The relief was almost visible. Edmund told him what would happen. A confession, every detail. Signed. Then England, within the month. Or prosecution for forgery, which was a capital offense. Philip put down the fork. He pulled the letter toward him and looked at it the way a man looks at something he made in the dark that he is seeing for the first time in daylight. His hand, when he picked up the pen, shook so badly the first line was illegible, and he had to start again on a fresh sheet. Edmund stood by the window. He did not sit. He watched. It took 40 minutes. He took the confession. He rode to Catherine's father, 60 miles. He told Sir Andrew everything. Sir Andrew read the confession. What do you intend to do? Whatever she permits. She may not forgive you. I know. You may try. I will not speak for her. She speaks for herself. Then Edmund published a notice in 3 London papers clearing Catherine's name and taking full blame. He wrote 44 individual letters to every host and hostess who might have heard a whisper about her. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He wrote for 2 days. He deployed every resource he had. He solved the problem the way he solved every problem, with speed and money and decisiveness. And it was the wrong apology for the wrong sin, and he did not know it yet. Catherine saw the notice at the inn. The innkeeper's wife showed her the paper over breakfast. She read it twice. She put the paper down. Her jaw tightened. Her hands went flat against the table, pressing down. The same gesture she had made on the bench, holding herself still, except that on the bench she had been holding back grief, and at the inn, she was holding back the recognition of a man making decisions about her life without consulting her. He had put her name in 3 newspapers. He had described her character to the nation. He had defined her to the public without asking her how she wished to be defined. She walked to Harlow Park. She was admitted to the study. Edmund was at his desk, writing letter 44. He was haggard, unshaven, ink on his cuffs, the full machinery of a dukedom redirected from drainage to remorse. She stood in the doorway. "You published a notice in 3 newspapers. Did you consider asking me before you put my name in the papers?" His hands went still on the desk. A drop of ink fell from the nib to the blotter, spreading in a small black bloom. The face of a man who has been running for 4 days on the certainty that he was doing the right thing, and who has just been asked whether he checked. "No, I did not ask." She walked into the study. She stood in front of his desk, between the stacks of letters, the addressed envelopes, the published notice folded beside his elbow. "Edmund, you ended our engagement without asking me whether the letter was real. You have now attempted to repair the engagement without asking me what I need. You believe the mistake was believing the letter. The mistake was not believing the letter. The mistake was deciding alone. You decided alone to believe it. You decided alone to end the engagement. You decided alone to exile Philip and ride to my father and publish a notice. The letter was the excuse. The deciding is the disease." The study was very quiet. The 44 letters lay around him like fallen leaves. The ink bloom on the blotter continued to spread. "I do not need you to fix my reputation. I need you to ask me a question and then stand still while I answer it. I need you to be uncertain. I have never seen you be uncertain. I have seen you be wrong. You have been wrong for 12 months. But being wrong is something you discover afterward, and being uncertain is something you endure during. And you have never endured during, Edmund. You skip to the answer." His hands pressed flat against the desk, the way hers had pressed against the bench and against the table, as though holding himself to something solid while the room shifted. "What do you need me to do?" That question, asked to me, before you act, every time. She told him to stop writing letters. No more notices, no more decisions about her name without her name's permission. She would walk the lane every morning at 7. He could be on the lane or not. She turned to leave. "Catherine." She stopped. She did not turn around. "I am sorry. Not for the notice, not for the letters. For deciding alone. For believing I could solve you the way I solve drainage. You are not drainage. I am sorry." Her shoulders, which had been held in the rigid line of a woman delivering a verdict, dropped by a 1/4 inch. "That is a better apology than the newspaper." She left. Chapter 5. The next morning, Edmund was on the lane at 7, on foot, not on horseback. He had left the horse at the stable. He was standing on the lane in his walking coat, with his hands at his sides, the way a man stands when he has been told to be somewhere and has not been told what will happen when he gets there, and has decided to survive the not knowing, which was new for him and visible, and cost him something in every muscle of his very straight back. Catherine appeared at the inn gate at 7:05. She saw that he was on foot. The horse was gone, the height advantage was gone. He was standing on the same ground she was standing on, and the choice to dismount was the first correct choice he had made in 4 days. She walked toward the clinic. He fell into step beside her. "You may walk with me. You may not talk unless I ask you a question. This is not a conversation. This is a walk. I am permitting your presence. I am not permitting your input." He nodded. They walked the 1/4 mile in silence. At the clinic gate, "Same time tomorrow, if you wish." "I will be here." On foot. On foot. He came back the next morning, and the next. Every morning on foot, in silence. She permitted his presence. She walked beside him with the formal posture of a woman escorting a stranger, which was what he was, she had decided. Whatever he had been 13 months ago, he was a stranger now, and strangers must be learned from the beginning. On the 3rd morning, it rained. He was wearing the riding coat. He did not offer it. He had not been asked. He walked beside her in the rain while she got wet, and the effort was visible, in the set of his jaw, in the way his hands stayed at his sides instead of reaching for the buttons, the precise discipline of a man restraining his most fundamental instinct, which was to fix things. She walked a full minute in the rain, then, "Your Grace, I would like the coat." He removed it. He handed it to her. She put it on. It was enormous. It smelled of horse. They walked the rest of the way in rain. He was soaked. She was dry. On the 4th morning, the sun came out. The lane was muddy. Halfway to the clinic, his boot caught a rut and he stumbled. Not badly. A half-step sideways, a brief loss of the perfect composure, a Duke off balance on a muddy lane at 7 in the morning. He recovered immediately. But Catherine had seen it, the fraction of a second when the Duke of Harlow was not in control. And she turned away, and the turning was a kindness, because she was letting him be imperfect without witnessing it, and the kindness was the first she had offered since the bench. On the 5th morning, she asked him a question. Why had he paid the mortgage? "Because your father's debt was causing him distress, and because I was about to become his son-in-law, and because I could." 3 paces of silence. "You made a financial decision affecting my family without telling me, and you see no connection between that and the other decisions you have made without telling me." He walked 3 more paces. His breath was visible in the cold air. He watched it dissipate. "I see the connection now." "When did you see it?" "When you said the word drainage." The corner of her mouth moved, a fraction, a muscle responding against its owner's wishes. She corrected it. She walked on. On the 7th morning, she said he could speak. She wanted him to tell her one thing about the last 12 months that he had not told anyone. He walked beside her. The only sound was their footsteps, matched. 2 people walking at the same pace because their bodies remembered how to walk together, even though the rest of them had not. "I did not open the ring box because I was afraid that opening it would make the ending real. I told myself I was keeping it as a relic. I was keeping it as a door I could not walk through, but could not lock. Except I did lock it. I locked it and I carried the key, and the key was not a keepsake. It was a leash. I kept myself tethered to a drawer I would not open because opening it was an ending, and not opening it was a life sentence, and I chose the life sentence because the life sentence still had her in it." They reached the clinic gate. Something behind Catherine's expression shifted, the recognition of a cost she had not known he was paying, and the recognition changed the geometry of her face by a degree. "That is the first thing you have told me that cost you something. The notice cost you money and reputation. What you just told me cost you pride. They are not the same currency. I need the second one. I have no use for the first." On the 9th morning, she tested him. She was staying a 3rd week. The inn was expensive. He walked. His right hand opened and closed once, a fist made and unmade, the physical evidence of a sentence being constructed and demolished. He wanted to offer. He wanted to solve. The effort was written across his body the way strain is written across a rope, holding more than it was designed to hold. Your Grace, you may speak. He chose each word with the visible deliberation of a man diffusing something. Would you like help with the cost of the inn? No. He nodded. He did not argue. He did not insist. He walked beside her in silence, carrying the no. Carrying it the way she had been carrying the 4 sentences for 12 months, without putting it down, without trying to make it something other than what it was. At the clinic gate. Edmund. Not your Grace. His name. For the first time since the garden. Tomorrow you may offer the coat without being asked. It is going to rain. She went through the gate. He walked home. He went to the study. He sat at his desk. He took the repayment schedule from the open drawer and held it. He held it the way a man holds the only evidence he has that the trial is not yet over, that the proceeding requires his attendance and the verdict has not been delivered. He held it until the light through the window shifted from morning to midday, and then he put it back and closed the drawer and walked to the kitchen and asked Mrs. Albright for tea. And Mrs. Albright looked at his face and gave him the reserve. On the 15th morning, she told him she had not slept well since April. He walked beside her. He did not say, I am sorry. He did not say, neither have I. He walked. He waited. He had learned, it had taken 15 mornings, that the space after she spoke was not a space for him to fill. I replaced the pillow twice. The first one was ruined by October. I cried into it every night for 6 months. The second one I ruined by February. I have been sleeping on the third since March. It is holding up. I am not certain. 2 pillows, 6 months each. The arithmetic of grief measured in linen and feathers. I did not know, he said very quietly. You were not supposed to know. I am telling you now because you have walked beside me for 15 mornings without asking for anything, and I have decided that a man who can walk in silence for 15 mornings has earned a pillow. Do not thank me for my grief. I am showing you what the 4 sentences cost. The pillows were mine. Yours was expensive. Mine was worse. On the 18th morning, she changed the route. The garden, the bench. She sat on the bench. He stood. Sit down, Edmund. He sat. A foot of stone between them. The foot of stone was both too much and not enough, and Catherine was aware of the bench beneath her and the heat of another body 1 foot to her left, and the awareness was a betrayal committed by her own skin, which remembered what proximity meant before her pride had redefined it, and her skin did not care about the redefinition. I am going to tell you something, and I would like you to listen and not respond. He nodded. I have been watching you for 18 mornings. I have watched you swallow sentences I could see forming on your face. I have watched you be refused and come back the next morning anyway. I have watched you carry the pillows. You have not mentioned them. You have not tried to make them lighter. Her voice thickened. The composure was not breaking. It was loosening. The way a hand loosens around a rope it has been gripping for so long, the hand has forgotten it is gripping at all. And the loosening was not weakness, but the first sign that the hand might, if it chose, let go. You have been the man I needed you to be 12 months ago. You have been him for 18 days. I do not know if 18 days is enough. I know it is a start. He sat on the bench. He did not speak. She had told him to listen. You may respond now. I do not want to say the wrong thing. That is the right thing to say. The corner of her mouth moved. Not a smile, the architecture of a smile. The structural possibility. He saw it. He did not comment on it. He had learned that the things she gave him were not to be named. He asked if he could come to the bench tomorrow. He asked if he could bring something. Bring coffee. I have been drinking the inn's tea for 3 weeks, and it is terrible. How do you take it? Strong. No sugar. If you put sugar in it, I will know you are not listening. Good morning, Edmund. She walked out of the garden. He sat on the bench holding a request for coffee the way other men hold proposals. He bought coffee from the village that afternoon. He did not send a servant. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Bell, looked at the Duke in her shop. Strong, Your Grace? Very strong. No sugar. Mrs. Bell looked at him over the counter. I know someone who takes her coffee strong with no sugar. Mrs. Bell, please sell me the coffee. Mrs. Bell sold him the coffee. She told her husband that evening that the Duke had been improved. Her husband asked by what? She said, by the obvious. Now pass the jam. He brought coffee to the bench every morning after that. Strong, no sugar, in a plain tin flask. The ritual was small, and the smallness was the point. They talked, not about the engagement, about the estate, the village, the roses. She offered an opinion about the drainage. He listened. He asked a follow-up question instead of executing. They arrived, together, at a solution neither would have reached alone, and the together was the thing. In the 4th week, her mother was well enough to travel. I will write to you. I would like that. I am not going to tell you what the letters mean. You will have to read them and not know. I will read them and not know. That is the exercise. You are getting better at it. You are not good at it yet. She stood. She held the flask for a moment. She handed it back. When I come back, if I come back, I would like my own flask. Choose one for me. That is a decision you may make alone. I am giving you permission for this one decision. Do not extrapolate. They corresponded through the summer and autumn. He told her about the drainage and the mornings on the lane where he still walked at 7, though she was 60 miles away. He told her about the roses, which he was pruning himself, badly. She told him about Henry, who had revised his opinion of the Duke from, I will kill him, to, I will tolerate him from across a room, which represented significant diplomatic progress. She told him about the morning she found herself walking to the east window without knowing why, and realizing it was because the east window faced Berkshire. She did not tell him she had forgiven him. He survived the not knowing. In September, she wrote, I dreamed about the bench. I was sitting on it. You were not there. The coffee was. When I woke up, I was angry that the coffee was better than your company. And then I was angry that I was angry. And then I laughed at myself. And I have not laughed at myself in 12 months. And I thought you should know. He wrote back, I am glad you laughed. I will endeavor to be more competitive. The roses send their regards. They have survived my pruning. I have not deserved their forgiveness either, but they appear to be giving it anyway. I hope you will be more complicated. In November, I have delayed. I am not ready. Please do not ask. He did not ask. I am here. The coffee is ready. The bench is cold but present. I will wait. He waited. December began. He walked the lane every morning. He sat on the bench when the weather permitted. He carried the flask, her flask, a small copper flask he had found at a village market, plain, well-made, the right size for a woman's hand. He did not know whether she would come. On the 11th of December, a letter arrived. 2 sentences. Edmund, come to Hampshire. Bring the ring. Bring the flask. Chapter 6. He rode to Hampshire, 60 miles. He had the ring in his pocket, loose, not in the box, where his hand could close around it. He had the flask in his coat, filled with strong coffee, no sugar. Sir Andrew looked at his face and said, "She is in the garden." The garden was small, cold, bare. Frozen ground and stripped hedges. Catherine was standing by the gate. She was wearing the gray dress. She was wearing his riding coat over it, the enormous, ridiculous coat she had borrowed on a rainy lane and which had, apparently, never been returned. He stopped. He looked at the coat. "I kept it. I noticed. It is warm. It is also terrible. These things are not mutually exclusive." He walked to her. He took out the flask, the copper flask, warm from his body. She took it. She opened it. She drank. Strong, no sugar, right. "You remembered." "I have remembered everything." She turned the flask in her hands. "I know. You remember the drainage conversation. You remember which vine you pulled up. You have remembered everything I have told you, and you have not once used it to make a decision I did not ask you to make. That is what I was waiting for." He stood in front of her in a December garden. She was in his coat. She was holding his flask. "Give me the ring." He took out the sapphire, his grandmother's ring. He held it out in his open palm. She took it. She held it. The deep blue, the gold setting. She had last held this ring on a Tuesday in April, wrapping it in cloth, tucking 8 words underneath. It was warm from his pocket, from his hand, from 13 months carried against his chest. The warmth of the sapphire was his warmth, and the warmth was in her palm, and she closed her fingers around it and held it, in one hand, the weight of everything that had gone wrong and everything that had been done to mend it, and the weight was small, the weight was a ring, the weight was nothing, and nothing, she had told him once, is not free. She stood in a December garden with a ring in her closed fist, and the cold on her face and the coat around her shoulders, and she breathed, once, the way she had breathed on the bench the first time she sat on it, the breath of a woman allowing herself, after a very long time, to stop performing. She opened her hand. She put the ring on her own finger. She did it herself. "I am not doing this because of the notice, or the letters, or Philip on a boat, or 60 miles to my father. Being sorry is the minimum." She looked at the ring on her hand, and then she looked at him, and the looking was steady and open, and it was the first time in 13 months she had looked at him without the composure between them, and his hands at his sides were not steady, and the not steadiness was the truest thing about him. "I am doing this because for 8 months you asked me what I needed, and then did what I answered instead of what you decided. Because you carried the pillows without trying to make them lighter. Because you found a flask the right size for my hand, which means you were paying attention, which is not the same as deciding, and you are learning the difference, and the learning is what I love." The ring caught the low December light. "I would still marry you for nothing. But the nothing costs you asking. Every time. For the rest of your life. Can you do that?" "I do not know." His voice was rough, stripped. The voice of a man who has taken off the last piece of composure and is standing in what is underneath. That is the honest answer. I will fail at it. I will skip to the answer because it is a reflex and reflexes do not disappear. I will fail. I will not stop trying. It is enough. "You are certain?" "No, I am uncertain. I am choosing you anyway. That is what uncertain looks like when it is honest. You should recognize it. You have been practicing." She was smiling. Not the fraction, not the architecture. A real smile. The first in 13 months. It changed her face the way spring changes a garden. The same ground, everything different. He stepped forward. He took her hand, the hand with the ring. "What would you like to do now?" "Take me home, to the bench. I would like coffee in the cold, and I would like the roses to be badly pruned, and I would like to not know what happens next, and I would like that to be all right." "And Edmund? Yes? When we get there, you may offer to build the fire without being asked. I am giving you permission for fires. Do not extrapolate. He laughed. The laugh came out rough and surprised and real. The laugh of a man who has been earning for 8 months and who has just been given permission for fires, and who understands that permission for fires is not permission for everything, and who is more than fine with this. Who is a man standing in a December garden, learning that love is not a decision you make once, but a question you keep asking, and the asking never stops, and the not stopping is the point. They drove to Harlow Park. They arrived at dusk. Mrs. Albright was at the door. She saw the ring and the coat and the flask, and did not say a word and did not need to. They walked to the garden. The bench, the roses, dormant, badly pruned, surviving. The stream, half frozen. Edmund built the fire. A small one in the old iron grate. He built it without asking. She had given him permission. He did not extrapolate. Catherine sat on the bench. He sat beside her, not a foot apart. Beside her, shoulder to shoulder. The fire caught. The garden warmed by 1 degree. She poured coffee from her flask. She poured 2 cups. She handed him one. Strong, no sugar. The roses look terrible. I know. You will need help. You have been deciding for the roses. The roses have opinions. I have opinions about roses, she said. I know. She put her head on his shoulder. He closed his eyes. The fire burned. The garden was cold. The coffee was warm. The ring was on her finger. The flask was in her hand. The key was still on the chain inside his waistcoat. Because some habits take time to end, and the key was the last piece of the old Edmund. The Edmund who locked things and carried them and did not open them. And he would take the key off, not today, but soon, when asking had replaced deciding, when the drawer was finally, permanently unlocked. Edmund, yes. I forgive you. Now? I decided in September, when I laughed at myself about the coffee. I did not tell you because the earning was changing you, and I did not want to interrupt it. He opened his eyes. You have let me earn for 3 months past the point of forgiveness. I wanted to marry the man who walks in silence and carries pillows and survives not knowing. That man did not exist in September. He exists now. I waited for him. Was it worth the wait? Ask me again in a year. I will. She put her head back on his shoulder. The fire burned low. The garden was dark. They sat there until the fire was embers, and the coffee was gone, and the stars were out, and the garden was the quietest place in England. The silence between them was not the cold silence of the first mornings on the lane, and it was not the charged silence of the wedding, and it was not the empty silence of the year apart. It was a new silence. The silence of 2 people sitting with what comes after, which is not an ending and not a beginning, but a middle. The lived-in, imperfect, ongoing middle of a thing that was broken and mended and is stronger at the mend than it was before the break. The way bones are, the way gardens are, the way anything is that has survived a winter and come out the other side. That was the whole of it. Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you are watching from and what the story made you feel. Do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss new stories.